Hi YouTube, in this tutorial I will show you how to make an herbal tincture using percolation. This method will allow you to make effective tinctures in a matter of days as opposed to a matter of weeks. The percolation method is really just the act of dripping your solvent through powdered plant material. For those who do not know me, my name is Kat Ellis. I'm an herbalist and preparedness instructor. I'm the author of 2 books, Prepper's Natural Medicine and Prepping for a Pandemic. You can read more about what I teach and keep up with my herbal shenanigans on my website at herbalprepper.com. So to make herbal tinctures using percolation, we're going to need to get some supplies. We're going to need a kitchen scale that measures in ounces, powdered plant material. You need a percolation cone, and these can be hard to find and expensive when you do find them, so please check out my tutorial on how to make your own percolation at home. You're also going to need coffee filters, alcohol, water, a tamping tool, and a narrow mouth mason jar or similar jar. Now, I'm making a set of 4 antibiotic herbal tinctures to go into my personal emergency kit. It's the middle of winter. I don't have any fresh plant material available to make a maceration, so I'm going to use this opportunity to demonstrate the percolation method. And the plants that I've chosen, I have 2 that are systemic antibiotic plants and 2 that are local antibiotic plants. So the very first one here is Bidens pilosa, which is a really hardy weed that grows just about anywhere and everywhere. And the next one is Sida acuta. Acuta probably has more research on it than other types of Sida, but Sida grows just about everywhere. There's probably a type that grows near you. And this is juniper berry. All types that I know are used interchangeably. And finally, we have amber cork tree, or Philodendron amarantz, which is a good source of berberine. So those are the 2 systemic and 2 local antibiotics that I picked for this project. But we got to do a little bit of math first. We need a ratio of 1 to 5, and that means 1 ounce of dried plant material by weight to 5 ounces of solvent by volume. And the solvent is your extraction liquid, and in this case it's a mixture of alcohol and water, and you need both because you need to extract both alcohol-soluble constituents and water-soluble constituents. So since I'm demonstrating this method using powdered juniper, using a solvent that is 75% alcohol and 25% water, I use grain alcohol and water for my Berkey filter, but if the only thing that you have on hand is vodka, just go ahead and use that. So the percentages are determined really by which plant you're using, and you can find this out in a materia medica like the one that I have in my book, Prepper's Natural Medicine. There's a materia medica of 50 different herbs that can be grown throughout most of the United States. So before I get started, I just want to point out one last thing. I'm using HDPE bottles here to store the tinctures afterwards. This is a type of plastic that does not leach. It is designed for caustic liquids, and it's a much better option for kits that are going to see a beating, such as what might go in a bug out bag. You might recall from a previous video I was looking for a good way to transport my glass bottles, and I finally just came to the conclusion that there isn't any, and I got this idea from Sam Kaufman of the Human Path. It's a wonderful idea. They don't drip, they don't break, they're just a better choice. Alright, so here's my homemade percolation cone, and if you don't have one, please see the previous tutorial that I made on how to make one. They're tough to find, and you can't do it without it. One thing you're going to want to do, though, please smooth out the edges so that you don't risk cutting yourself while packing the cone, and always be very cautious when you're working with glass. This was just a Pellegrino bottle that was cut in half. If you use a wine bottle that has wide hips, instead of something with a funnel shape, your coffee filter next is not going to stay in place. So here we have a coffee filter. Unbleached would have been nicer, but this is what I had on hand. So you're going to take it and you're going to fold it in half and try to make the creases crisp, because that's going to help keep things neat. And then you're going to fold the filter into thirds, and then you're going to count inwards 1, 2, and 3, and you'll be in the center of the filter, and that is where your herbs are going to get packed. And it's going to make a nice fit inside of your glass cone. So you're going to run some water on the inside of the glass and let the paper filter stick to it. It's going to become damp, and the water's going to act like a glue, and it's going to hold that filter in place. And I use a long flat tool that came with my canning kit, the thing that grabs the lids. You can use that to kind of work it into place. So here I've gone ahead in the interest of time, and I've positioned my coffee filter inside there, and I've stuck it to the sides of the glass, and I've packed tightly and evenly as I can some powdered juniper in there. So I had just sort of had it in a recycled food container, and I had poured in about 5 ounces or so of my solvent, and and I let it sit overnight, because I believe that that breaks down the cell walls of the plant and it produces a better percolation in the end. So just using some gentle force, a spoon in the very beginning, and then I moved to a different tool, a tamping tool, afterwards. I have packed this cone with the coffee filter just about all the way up to the very top, and now I'm out of plant material here. And I have this tamping tool that came with my food mill. You can use whatever you have on hand, anything that, just as long as it is smaller than the diameter of your cone, that'll fit in there. Maybe a plastic bottle or something that you can use to just push down on those herbs. The tighter and even, the more even you get it, the better the solvent is going to flow through it. So that's very important. As you can see, some of the dampened herb is stuck to the end of my tamping tool here. So I'm going to try and scrape some of that back in. It doesn't have to be wet, and it's not because there's alcohol there. It's not, the herbs never really get wet. They just sort of barely stick together. Like if you were to pinch it together, it'll just barely hold its shape. So now we're going to be ready to pour some of the solvent into the cone, and I like to start out pouring it slowly first. I don't want to disturb the herbs that's been packed into the cone, but you might be asking, of course, how much powdered herb is in that cone? So we've just got a little bit more math to do before we can continue. So if you recall, we need that ratio of 1 to 5. For this, I start with 4 ounces of powdered herbs and 20 ounces of my mixed solvent. And I take 5 ounces of that solvent to dampen my herbs, and I let that sit overnight. Now it might be slightly less or slightly more than 5 ounces depending on your powder and depending on how humid it is. So don't be afraid to add a little bit more, add a little bit less. That's not a big deal. But you're going to be left with approximately 15 ounces of solvent to run through your cone. Now the neat thing here is after your herbs have soaked overnight, divide that up into thirds. And that 1/3 of that powder is going to fill that coffee filter all the way up to the top, just about every time. I mean, when I've done it, either sometimes it's a little bit less than the top of the filter or a little bit more than the filter, and you can see it all set up right there. But 1/3 fits into the filter, and you're going to run 1/3 of your remaining solvent, which is 5 ounces. You're going to run that through it. Now what I like to do, because I like to do things in threes, it's just a personal habit of mine, I will run that 5 ounces through that packed cone, that same 5 ounces of solvent 3 times. That's just my personal habit. That's where I like it. And then once that's happened, I take that tincture that's been run through now 3 times, and I transfer it to another jar with a label, and I set it aside. And then I go back and I take my second third of my pre-moistened herbs and I repack that cone, and I take my second third, which is about 5 ounces of my solvent, and I run that through. And I run that solvent through that second packed cone 3 times. And then I transfer that to my tincture jar. And then I go through and I do it one more time until I've used up all of the powdered herbs and all of my solvent. Now that's what I do. That's the strength that I like it at. So you'll begin to see this start to drip. And I think you can see a few of the drips coming down there now. And you can control the drip if you think it's too fast by taking the bottle cap from one of these and just screwing it back on. But it shouldn't be a free flow. It shouldn't be flowing too quickly, that it's just pouring, because you haven't packed the cone tightly enough at that point. And it shouldn't take hours before it starts. So as you can see, I have 3 of them set up here. I have 1 more to set up. And I like to put a little barrier on top with a coffee filter. It's just a simple barrier that keeps things out of the herbs. And as you can see, it's already turning quite dark just on this first pass through the powdered herbs. So I'm going to run them through a couple more times, and then do exactly what I said before. I run the 5 ounces through. I run it through a total of 3 times, and I transfer it to a jar. And then start all over with fresh herb and fresh solvent that I have until I've used up all of my material. So I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make herbal tinctures and percolation. If you want more information on herbal medicine, please check out my books, Prepper's Natural Medicine and Prepping for a Pandemic. I greatly appreciate you watching. Please subscribe using the button below, and also sign up for my free newsletter on my website at herbalprepper.com. Thank you, YouTube, and we'll see you in the next video.